Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Around the world, tens of thousands of people insist they are being stalked, harassed, and even tortured by directed energy weapons and electronic devices. But are these otherwise ordinary men and women the victims of some mind control experiment, or are they simply losing their minds? Tonight, we'll hear from two alleged victims of electronic harassment who'll present their best evidence. And we'll also speak with a skeptic who insists these individuals, while well-meaning and sincere, are misguided and that no such mind control experiment exists. Our mission is to investigate these claims and follow the truth, wherever it may lead. It's time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human alien hybrid? That's how cynical I am now about the process. History, media, technology can alter weather patterns created by the make it has been engineered by the Illuminati.
There's no doubt.
Marcia Lee is with us here on The Conspiracy Show. Marcia, tell us about yourself.
I live in New York City. I've had this apartment for almost 30 years, and I'm a victim of electronic harassment.
For the uninitiated, what is electronic harassment?
Electronic harassment takes several different forms. And in my case, there was a couple who were both deceased in this building under horrific circumstances. And when he moved into this building, he had wired this whole building with cameras all over the place for the men who owned the building at that time. And I heard him and his wife. And they said that I had to give up this apartment, that I had to bring the key to this apartment to their house, the key to my car, the key to my little cottage in New Jersey, and I had to walk out of here with nothing and start my life all over again and just leave everything with them. If I didn't do that, they were going to turn off the electricity, do all kinds of things in this apartment, and I would have no way of explaining this to people in any logical way.
Derek Robinson is president of a human rights organization called Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance. Derek, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
What is electronic harassment?
Electronic harassment refers to victimization by a variety of technologies, surveillance technologies as well as mind control technologies that are being used today covertly.
Tell me about your organization, FFCHS, Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance.
There are a variety of scenarios that we are dealing with as a victim community. We are a support organization to those who find themselves victims of mind control technologies and surveillance technologies.
Derek, are you personally a victim of electronic harassment, or have you been in the past a victim?
Yes, I am, Richard. I am also. There is surveillance, 24/7 monitoring and surveillance, whether I'm at home or out in the community. The voice-to-skull technology, or the synthetic telepathy, also called the microwave hearing effect, which is basically the projection of the human voice into one's mind. I receive that on a nightly basis, daily basis. There's also mind-reading technology that is being utilized in my case. There's also other types of technologies that assault the human mind and body in a variety of ways that cause any number of effects, from pain induction, nausea, dizziness, headaches, irritation, a number of assaults to the nervous system, irregular heartbeats. Sometimes it's sped up quite quickly, dramatically, or sometimes it slows to a crawl, it almost stops. And there are many instances where people have to be rushed to the emergency room because of these physical effects. Isolation is one of the main protocols, and once that individual is isolated, they are often harassed further to the point of what we see as sometimes suicide or even homicide.
The type of electronic harassment you've just described is known as voice-to-skull torture. Explain a little bit about what that is in more detail.
Once these people introduce themselves to you, when they start in with you, they rotate with each other and they speak to you 24 hours a day.
Synthetic telepathy, that's when the human voice is broadcast into one's mind.
They told me that they were going to come up the fire escape, you know, send somebody up the fire escape, and that they were going to break the window, and then I just had to leave the apartment. And that's how the whole thing started. I was totally, totally petrified.
I don't doubt their sincerity at all. They're simply misunderstanding what they're experiencing. The problem is that there's no logical connection between a person's sincerity and their believability and the validity of their claims.
When you first started to hear these voices, did you first think that perhaps there was something physically wrong with you, that perhaps these were auditory hallucinations?
I thought that I was thinking a lot of things. Once this starts, it never ends. The cast of characters might change, but you have this 24/7.
Derek, forgive me, I have to ask, but what would you say to a skeptic who might suggest that you, perhaps other alleged victims, are suffering from some mental illness? How are we able to differentiate?
Well, that's actually a very good question, because a lot of the things that we complain about are symptoms of mental illness. When you talk about hearing voices in one's mind, if you say that to a psychiatrist, you're automatically diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic.
So are they imagining these symptoms? Do they have some psychological disorder?
When you're looking at many of these claims, essentially what you're seeing are very similar symptoms to paranoid schizophrenia, delusional, various types of delusions.
Which is why so many people experience this and are kind of at a loss of what to do. They feel that they are losing their mind, and those around them that they explain this to feel the same way.
I know that it isn't schizophrenia because the voices are all directed towards one situation. And after a while, they were reading from a prepared script.
Most people who have these sorts of disorders, they're not drooling lunatics you see on film. They look like ordinary, everyday citizens. They look like you or me. They're our neighbors. They're our family members.
You find that your whole audience of people, your loyal friends, poo-poo everything because they don't think this is really happening. And it will only happen if you're by yourself.
Isolation is one of the main protocols. And once that individual is isolated, they are often harassed further to the point of what we see as sometimes suicide or even homicide.
And that's when people commit suicide or try to get help for a condition that most people don't understand. And what happens is they end up getting sedated and treated for a medical condition, which becomes a mental condition. And it's actually just a form of harassment. At the same time, the harassers are laughing at the whole thing.
The problem is that they're not providing evidence that we would need to verify their stories. They're just sort of saying, I have these symptoms, and I think that this is happening to me. And when you ask them, why do you think this is happening? Well, I don't know, or it's some conspiracy, or I'm just a victim, or they come up with some answer, but it's never a thing that brings a solution.
What's the purpose of this? Are they trying to drive you crazy?
Yes. It's after a while you start thinking, this can't be a coincidence. This is so bizarre that wherever I'm going, this other person is going.
David Lawson, who is an investigator who actually went underground and observed these groups for about 13 years. He wrote a book called Call Stalking. And basically, he describes their methods and their purpose as the intention is to destroy the target.
Ben, we know with a great deal of certainty that the government and certain intelligence groups have targeted U.S. citizens for some sort of experimentation. So why couldn't the claims of these alleged victims be true?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I don't have any doubt at all that there is technology available that could mimic some of the complaints and symptoms that some of these people are experiencing.
This technology has been in development since the 70s, when there was a first demonstration by Joseph Sharp and his colleague and engineer Mark Grove. They worked at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research.
Yeah, didn't they do experiments back in the 50s? Yes, there. It seems pretty clear that there were some experiments along the lines of mind control in the 50s and in the 60s and thereon.
The experiments that Jose Delgado was doing, you can see some of those on YouTube. That he was able to, with a radio transmitter, control the actions of a cat, to lick its fur, to be aggressive. He even used the expression, he could use a cat like an electronic toy.
That doesn't answer the question as to why, number one, they would be continuing to this day to operate on ordinary citizens with no particular motive. Why? Why are you so important that you think that there's a special branch of the CIA or another or clandestine group that is doing this to you?
I was trying to figure out why me. You know how everybody goes through this Queen of Self-Pity thing. Why me? What did I do? And what I thought about, it's strictly a business situation. What I figured out was that this guy next door had, one of the things he screamed through the wall was that he used to work for them at one time in their electronics company. And he said, the woman is an idiot, but that guy is an electronic genius. So I said, oh my gosh, he has an electronic background. So I figured he hired them.
And typically they say, well, you know, I don't really know, or maybe they're experimenting on me, or I don't know because, of course, it's a conspiracy. I mean, ultimately, that's always one of the answers is, you know, anytime they don't have an answer for a question like that, they just say, well, it's a conspiracy. What do you expect?
Why you, Derek? Why are you being targeted in this way?
I was in the Navy from 75 to 82. And the last year of my enlistment was when I started to be surveilled. I worked at NSA at the time for the U.S. Navy. And during this last year, I realized that I had come under surveillance by this particular organization. And I was hoping that after that year was up, after my enlistment was up, that all the harassment would end. However, it did not. And it has continued since 1982 up until the present. So I realized that at that point that I was not alone, and this was basically a huge area of the military covert community that targets individuals in this country.
So again, what were they after? Were they trying to drive you crazy? Were they trying to discredit you? Did you have some information that they wanted? Why you?
They originally targeted me while in the Navy under suspicion of sexual orientation was really their original idea. They had decided to continue that harassment. Around 2004 was when I found the targeted community. So I realized that at that point that I was not alone, and this was basically a huge area of the military covert community that targets individuals in this country.
There's countermeasures, but you have to go to a trained professional to find out what they are, so your situation is not hopeless.
Yes, it's not a norm of this business, but I do probably receive at least one call a month for electronic harassment or something to that effect. It's really difficult to make out what's really going on with these people. And it definitely could be intentional, it could be real, and it could be from everyday sources that are around them. And I try to decipher that and figure that out over the phone with them.
What sort of products could you offer them that might help shield them from this remote covert harassment?
Typically, we find we have good results with shielding paint that reflects 99.9% of microwave radiation and radio waves, so that's a very effective solution. We also have shielding fabrics or cloths that people tend to make canopies out of, and they can sleep underneath them and shield themselves from RF frequencies that way as well.
Derek, how do you get relief from this electronic harassment torture? Do you employ some sort of a counter electronic measure?
I don't employ any type of methods. I'm okay. Basically, I'm trying to get the stalking, the surveillance to stop, and the 24/7 harassment, the voices that I get at night, the access to my mental processes.
How could we explain these victims' claims that they're hearing voices inside their heads, assuming that they're not mentally ill?
Yes, that is difficult for me to explain. I truly believe the technology is available to do that.
It's not a matter of any type of shielding, a method that would help that.
Let's see what the...
What is that, number one?
You know what, it's off the scale. The signal's so high that it's going off the scale. Just from the effects of this microphone, or this remote microphone alone, it would cause somebody that's electrically sensitive to react severely and start going into the symptoms of headaches, nausea, confused state.
What I would suggest is to look on the internet and find a private investigator who specializes in electronic harassment. And all you have to do is Google electronic harassment, and there's lots of different companies all over the country that specialize in electronic harassment.
Are there weapons and non-lethal weapons that are being developed by the military and law enforcement? Absolutely. I don't doubt that for a minute. They're well known. You can buy them yourself if you want.
Derek, you're no longer in the Navy, you're no longer with the NSA. So why does this harassment, surveillance persist in your case? What are they after?
Okay, to personalize it, in my case, I can only extrapolate. I can only guess at what the reasoning would be. However, it seems to be similar and seems to be a similar protocol to the others who are also victimized, and that is basically to destroy the target's life. Socially, financially, any type of business ventures that they would want to start, everything that they would want to pursue in life, they would like to derail. Everything gets invaded. What the reasoning is, I don't know, but I do feel that they want to be there for the duration of their life. This is a lifetime venture for them. And as I mentioned, their protocol in this particular situation is to drive the person to self-destruction. More people are being singled out daily. More people are being targeted. In the US, in Canada, this is a worldwide scenario.
In order to assess the case for covert electronic harassment presented by our two alleged victims tonight, we need to ask ourselves two questions. First, do these electronic devices and directed energy weapons exist? I believe the answer is yes. Secondly, have governments and intelligence groups demonstrated a willingness to target their own citizens for covert experimentation, sometimes resulting in serious harm or even death? The answer, again, a clear yes.
Are there weapons and non-lethal weapons that are being developed by the military and law enforcement? Absolutely. I don't doubt that for a minute. They're well known. You can buy them yourself if you want. That doesn't necessarily mean there's any connection between the fact that these weapons exist or are in development, depending on which ones you're talking about, and these people's symptoms. I mean, there's no connection there. Could these things be happening? It could happen, certainly. That's not the question. The question is there evidence for these things?
Does that mean that everyone who claims to hear voices in their head or that their insomnia is a result of a directed energy weapon is the victim of electronic harassment? Of course not. But neither can we assume that these same alleged victims are all suffering from some psychological disorder. When it comes to claims of covert electronic harassment, I'm filing this one under pending further investigation. And now, we'd like to hear what you think. You can contact us here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid. Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Good night.